As competition for keywords has intensified, the cost per clicks have risen. It's made it more expensive for marketers to achieve the same results as they did in the past. So that's made the already big issue even worse.
Marketing Architects.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Angela Voss, the CEO of Marketing Architects, and Rob DeMars, the Chief Product Architect of Misfits and Machines.
Hey, guys.
Hey!
We're back with our thoughts on some recent marketing news, always trying to root our opinions in data, research, and what drives business results. Today, we are talking about search. There is a lot of breaking news to cover, including a not-so-surprising decision by Google to not scrap third-party cookies after all, and a much more surprising decision by a judge to label Google a monopoly in online search. There's a lot to get to today, so let's just jump into it and start with the cookies. I found an article by the Boston Consulting Group that does a nice job summarizing what happened a few weeks ago. Google announced in late July that it's scrapping its plan to eliminate third-party cookies in Chrome. Instead, they'll allow users to opt out more easily. And the study found these changes to third-party cookies could put at least 20% of targeted marketing data at risk. But it's not all bad for brands, because Boston Consulting Group also found that small and medium-sized businesses that move away from third-party cookies found performance improve by 100%. I should mention that enterprises also experienced a performance improvement, but only by 10%. So I wanted to share a few more stats to set up our conversations. Now, these are from Privacy Journal. 62% of marketers believe phasing out third-party cookies will be bad for consumers. And 75% of marketers in major economies still rely heavily on third-party cookies. In 2023, 40% of all active websites used cookies. Well, how do consumers feel about them? Well, a significant portion of them are, no surprise, indifferent, as consumers typically are to marketing topics like this, but we should think about how consumers react to this, since they'll be given a choice to opt in or opt out. I'll share just one data point here. 95% of iOS users opt out of ad tracking. So depending on how Google sets up this opt-out page, the wording they use, I think we're going to see the majority of consumers deciding they don't want cookies following them around the internet. All right, and Rob, let's start with this saga that has been Google phasing out third-party cookies. What do you think about this recent development?
I definitely didn't have the sigh of relief, I guess, that I worry many marketers had. My perspective on this topic comes from that of one that's witnessed many brands waste millions of dollars using third-party cookies for CTV targeting, only to realize that all along there were better ways of reaching their customers. And I think, to your point, about 100% improvement in performance from that Boston Consulting Group study. So I just worry that without mandated change, that waste will just continue, and it'll cause marketers to underleverage a channel like CTV that holds immense potential. Rob, I was thinking about you. This would be like if White Castle announced that they were discontinuing the sliders, and so they took them away. And heartbreaking, right?
It breaks my heart.
Wouldn't you a little bit be like, for my health, maybe
it's probably better for me in the long run? Absolutely.
And then they brought them back. Yeah. And that temptation was back again. That's kind of how I think about this.
They are addicting. That's for sure. It's funny when you think about the iOS data point. That was fascinating, Elena. I think when consumers actually know what a cookie does, because it's kind of mysterious. It sounds friendly. Oh, Cookie Monster likes cookies. Cookies is a very friendly thing. And so if consumers have no idea, I don't care if a cookie is on a website, whatever, it sounds good to me. I think the way that iOS basically phrases it, I think you go, no, I don't want you following me around. So I do think the cookies are on their last legs here.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm really curious to see how they phrase it, because on your phone, if you go into an app, it'll say ask app not to track. I always select that. The way that they word it, I'm just like, no,
totally.
You don't get to track me. So I think you're right. I'm not surprised that 95% of people decide that they don't want to be tracked. And I'm really curious about how they phrase it.
I think they'll say, do you like cookies? And you'll be like, yes. Okay, there you go. You opted in.
And no problem at all. But yeah, Ange, I agree. Some of this stuff also is just exhausting. When this first came out, it was a really big deal. Marketers, I'm sure, started to prepare. And then as it kept going and going, I'm guessing people started to get less and less concerned with it. I know it affects publishers a lot too. And so I don't know. I feel like right now I'm just tired. And I bet a lot of marketers are tired too. But I was surprised by some of these stats about how many marketers still rely heavily on third-party cookies, like 75% in major economies, and 40% of all active websites use cookies. That's a lot of websites. So yeah, I agree with you. Like a little bit of concern with, okay, if this is just being pushed off indefinitely, it sounds like brands are still going to need to prepare for a future without cookies, because my guess is a lot of people are going to opt out. So you might as well treat it like they're going to go away, and it would probably work better.
Right. Yeah. I think just that shove into, we need to find new ways, we need to innovate and evolve. I think it did feel like a shove when that news initially broke that the third-party cookie was going to deprecate. And so you had marketers wander and start to explore and test. And in some cases, it was very happy news what they found, and not in all cases, right? And I think the cookie being used in CTV versus in one-to-one digital marketing, it's not that it doesn't have any value. It certainly has some value. It's just there's over-reliance. And I think in a lot of cases leads marketers to believe that what they're pushing out there is reaching that right consumer when in actuality it's not. And so those that I think continue to explore and look to new ways of targeting will probably find benefit in it. And in the long run, obviously, we'll be better off with all of us making decisions about who we want tracking and who we don't.
Google popularized the term mobile-geddon when they forced marketers to create reactive web pages that would work for mobile. I think they need to declare to marketers now, cookie-geddon. It's coming.
I like it. Well, we were kind of dancing around this a bit earlier, but I wanted to talk about just targeting effectiveness in general, because I think a lot of marketers might hear cookies are going away and that's going to make my targeting ineffective. That's why a lot of people feel unprepared. However, we have some contrarian beliefs about targeting that we've shared on this podcast before, specifically beliefs in first-party data and contextual being more effective than things like third-party data, cookies. And I know we've covered that on the podcast before, but it is a contrarian belief that we hold dear. So, Ange, would you mind covering again why we think many marketers might be approaching targeting incorrectly in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just long been the industry standard. There's a lot of data out there. The problem is, as we've talked about many times, the data is often incomplete or inaccurate. It's very expensive. And a lot of times the cost to acquire that data is not warranted based on who we can actually reach or the performance that we can drive using it. So by shifting to first-party data directly collected from consumers, marketers can access more reliable and relevant information and enable precise targeting and personalization approaches based on actual customer interactions. As I mentioned before, another challenge with relying on third-party data is the inability to truly measure the effectiveness, especially when campaigns are solely focused on reach, which in a lot of cases in a channel like CTV, that's why marketers are going there. If they've been in linear and they're trying to reach cord cutters, cord nevers, et cetera, marketers have to trust that this third-party data accurately identifies and reaches that right audience. And without that performance component to validate that the reach is doing something for them, it's just impossible to know if the ads are reaching the right people. So I also think that it's important to keep in mind how this all started and why it's such an issue. There's a massive economy around third-party data. This is a multi-billion-dollar market where data brokers are aggregating and selling and reselling information to advertisers and to agencies. And this economy has driven a bias towards hyper-targeting because it's profitable for many data providers. We love data. This would be an area that as a performance marketing agency, like you would think that we would dive headfirst into and just be so enthralled with everything that's out there and all of the behavioral, economic, et cetera, data that we could get our hands on. But the system is just inherently flawed. Like you've mentioned, we've seen studies like TrueSet, et cetera, revealing that nearly half of the data used for ad targeting is inaccurate. So when you come across things like that, and then also you have cases where marketers heard the cookie deprecation news, look to diversify. We're like, okay, well, we've been talking about getting our first party data in order for a long time. Now's the time to do it. Let's start looking at new targeting methods like contextual, et cetera, and then find that they can improve performance by 100%. You're kind of like, do we want these? Do we want these cookies? I don't know if we do.
Yeah, third-party data just has a lot to overcome too, if you just think about it practically, because if you're adding in layers of targeting, it's going to cost more. So it has to perform better to beat that higher cost. But then it also needs to be accurate, which it often isn't. So are you even hitting the right person? And then it needs to be effective. Say the cost is worth it. You are targeting that exact individual. Is that who you even want to be targeting? Like, you probably have a broader audience than you think. So it just seems like a lot of hurdles for it to work. So it's not surprising that, hey, contextual or using first party data, if you can target for less and maybe even have higher reach, that's probably going to be more effective. I also think that if marketers are interested in testing this, we've done a lot of A/B tests, and that can be a great way to start to prove out different types of targeting. If you don't want to completely abandon what you're doing, or you want to prove to leadership that there could be another way. We've done like A/B targeting tests with third-party data versus contextual, and that could be a way on a small scale.
Absolutely. I think you made a good point there too, that with this third-party data, it becomes perceivingly easier, it's all perception, to target folks that maybe are in market for your product or service. And like one of the things that we talk about a lot, given the focus of marketing effectiveness on this podcast, is winning the 95-5. And do methods like first party data or contextual targeting allow you to get outside of that addiction of just targeting those that are probably, they might come to you anyway, but instead getting out in front of new customers that don't know about you, extending reach and ensuring that when they do come to market, you're their first choice versus going to search and trying to find who they want to work with or ultimately landing on a competitor site.
Well, I actually have a second piece of news to share today. So let's move on to that. This happened right as I was preparing for this podcast recording. I thought, all right, we have to include this too, and we could use it as an opportunity to broaden the conversation a bit, because this cookie debacle has been sort of beat to death in conversations, but I don't think there's been enough conversation around just the state and effectiveness of search in general. So the article I'm sharing is by David McCabe for the New York Times, and it's titled, "Google is a Monopolist, Judge Rules in Landmark Antitrust Case." On August 5th, a federal judge declared that Google acted illegally to maintain a monopoly in online search. Judge Amit Mehta's 277-page decision highlights that Google abused its dominant position by paying companies like Apple and Samsung billions to ensure Google handled search queries on all their devices. This ruling could significantly impact big tech, marking the first major antitrust decision against a tech giant since Microsoft's case over 2 decades ago. And not a huge surprise, but Google is going to appeal the ruling. So some big news for Google here. How significant do we think this will be for them?
Yeah, it certainly adds another layer, right, to this conversation in terms of how we think about this space and the impact that this could have on the industry, particularly in how we understand and navigate the online search space. But I think it's crucial to recognize the sheer scale of Google's influence. For years, they've dominated the search market, not just because they have a great product in search, but also through strategic partnerships and financial arrangements. Obviously, it's complex of an issue being a 277-page report, but those moves have effectively locked competitors out. And I think we're seeing the judge's ruling highlight how those moves have really stifled the competition and potentially innovation in the search industry, because what's resulted from it, if we think about it from a marketer's perspective, this monopoly has meant that many businesses have had to rely heavily on Google's platforms for visibility and for traffic. And while Google Ads and organic search have been effective tools for marketers, the lack of competition has also kept prices high, lack of diversification in their marketing strategies, limited alternative avenues for driving traffic. So the good in this is the ruling could not only reduce Google's stronghold on marketers, but could additionally offer an avenue for marketers to deploy diversified strategies, which in the long run, I think could not only create a more sustainable marketing ecosystem for a brand, but also improve marketing outcomes, to the point we were making earlier.
Yeah, Google's just getting the Google kicked out of them, just from all sides right now. You look at the government taking them to the mat. You've got cookie-geddon going on now. And then just the changing landscape of search, thanks to AI. I mean, search is their bread and butter. They are arguably the greatest business model in the history of mankind, but that's really being threatened right now. We all have experienced better search experiences when it comes to using Perplexity or ChatGPT. So this isn't going to help with the government stepping in. And now they have new competitors on the horizon in a different way, right? Like just the way that AI search happens is not ad-based. So what are they to do? And it's a better experience for consumers. And even Apple, who they've gotten in trouble in the past being the frenemy of Apple with being a default search engine. Now Apple's making a deal with OpenAI for their artificial intelligence, at least for now. So they're not even the preferred provider of a technology they're often given credited for creating or at least popularizing lately. So they're in trouble.
I think it'll be interesting to see what the ruling is, like what happens to Google. I've heard that it's maybe most likely that they'll just cut off these agreements that they have with Apple and Samsung. However, I've also heard that that could just end up saving them a lot of money, because this happened somewhere in the EU. And I might not get all this right, but something like this happened, and people still like 90% of the time choose Google as their search engine if they're given a choice. So this ruling, we'll see. I think it sets a huge precedent. It's still a huge deal, but it'll be interesting to see what's the outcome, because if they just say we're tearing up these contracts, potentially Google could just save billions of dollars and still have most people use Google, because it's just like the automatic thing. So other search platforms, you should start advertising now. Get that mental availability up, because you're going to have a chance to grab some market share from Google. But I agree, Rob, they've been kind of going through it recently, and we can't predict the future and know exactly what's going to happen with them. But I wanted to talk just a little bit more about paid search. And Ange, you mentioned this a bit earlier, but you've worked with brands, marketers in all sorts of different categories. They have different products, services. But from your point of view, what's been the common feeling or theme with their paid search advertising?
I think it's sort of how Rob feels about White Castle sliders. You gotta, you hate to love them, love to hate them. I don't know what, maybe both. I mean, I think it's been complex. It's been evolving, mind numbing. I think key trends and sentiments have been that dependence is uncomfortable. It's become a crucial component of pretty much everybody's marketing strategy, right? And so while marketers appreciate the ability to deliver immediate results, get measurable ROI, we can argue whether or not all of the performance is driven by Google or is it driven by top of funnel channels like TV. But there's data around that, and they've been able to do what they do with it, perceivingly get some level of ROI and scale out of the channel. So they're living off of it. And I think that's an important piece for a lot of marketers, is just to sustain and be able to drive visits to their website and things like that and conversions. I think one of the major concerns has been the rising cost of paid search advertising. And as competition for keywords has intensified, the cost per clicks have risen. It's made it more expensive for marketers to achieve the same results as they did in the past. So that's just made already big issue even worse. And I think all of that has led to skepticism about Google's dominance, which I think leads back to the antitrust case. Marketers are aware of the limitations and the potential biases that a dominance like this can create. And so there's growing interest in exploring alternative search engines and advertising platforms. But it's a little like the cart and the horse too, because as we all sit here and talk about how Google has maybe hurt marketers, they're my default search engine. I'm not going to MSN. So it's a little like marketers need consumers to use new methods too. And certainly default engines and things like that can help, but they need a shift in behavior in order to be able to maximize a new avenue and diversify from avenues that have maybe been unhealthy in the past.
My son swears by DuckDuckGo.
Okay.
So there's one to check out there.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. This is the time, because I probably I would bet that 75% of my searches now start with ChatGPT, maybe even higher than that. And it's been a shift over time. This is the time where we could see like profound changes in consumer behavior, and who knows what it ends up looking like in terms of paid opportunities within OpenAI or ChatGPT, but it's crazy.
Well, there's a little bit maybe too. I know Andrew's saying that Google has this dominance. They're able to raise prices. It makes it really hard for marketers to compete and kind of having to pay the Google tax. But there probably is also a certain amount of the devil you know here. Because I don't know, as a marketer myself, the thought of all this diversification happening, people searching in different ways. I mean, Google, you don't really know how to rank, or they're always changing the algorithm, but at least it's familiar. I'd imagine a lot of marketers are feeling just nervous about the change in general. But I also wanted to add that I think one great example of how influential Google is, a lot of times marketers will come to us to advertise on TV, and a huge driver of that is just Google cost. Like, if I can just reduce the amount I'm paying on Google, which TV can, it sends more people right to your website, more people search your brand name. Like, a huge benefit of TV is just reducing dependency on Google paid search. That's pretty wild. I mean, it's the number one channel I'd say that comes up as something they want to try to move budget from. Rob, you teased this earlier, but this episode on search would not be complete if we didn't talk about bigger changes on the horizon, because everything we're discussing with Google paid search has the potential to be disrupted by a huge trend, which is just the change in how people search. So more people are searching using other platforms outside of traditional search engines. Those are platforms like TikTok, YouTube, Reddit, even Amazon. And I'm not saying this is easy, but marketers at least understand how they might start to rank on those platforms. Again, not easy, but there's probably some paths, some best practice to follow. However, search going to AI chatbots right now is a different story. So Rob, how do you think marketers should prepare, if they can, for a future where consumers are more and more using chatbots like ChatGPT to search?
I think they should start by refreshing their browser like once an hour to learn the latest news on how to even interact with AI. I mean, it changes literally on the hour. And I think we just discussed here how basically ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, they are the future search engines. So if you're thinking about SEO, how do you optimize for these new search engines? There's not a playbook right now. The most that we know is that these chatbots, they eat everything, and they like structured data, and they like clear language. So is the communication that you're putting out there following those best practices? That's definitely a start. And then I think the other side of this is, how do you have your own experiences within your engagement with your products feel more like a chat? How are you really leaning into AI for your own brand to make being able to search within your product more conversational? Because consumers are going to expect it. They're going to expect a more customized experience. But again, just how do we stay agile? How do we look at strategies that are more first-party data-based? Because again, based on what we were just talking about, that's where things are leaning towards. So I wish there was a magic manual to point people to, but we're all in this together, and we're all just going to need to stay agile and look to Sam Altman for the future of whatever it is that we're going to need to do.
Tactically, two things I've heard that I don't know how true these are, but when marketers are thinking about how do I rank with these chatbots, which is not an easy thing to figure out, I've heard that if you're practicing good SEO in general, that can help because these chatbots are often crawling the internet. So if you're already doing well with your ranking there, it can help. But recently, I also heard that there's going to be more and more scraping of YouTube. So if you're a brand and you don't have a YouTube channel, if you don't have content on YouTube, that could be something to think about. Again, it's a kind of Wild West, so I don't know exactly if that's going to hold.
It is. But YouTube's such a funny example because obviously they're owned by Google, yet all their competitors are eating it. How all that is working, I don't know, but that's a great point. What are some of the other channels that you can be looking at that you know that they're eating? And when was the last time that you queried your own brand within the chatbots and read how are they interpreting the data? And does that lead to your strategy at all? Are you even being found?
Conducting those types of searches makes me a little ill, but you gotta force yourself to do it. You're like, I don't know what they're going to say. All right. Thanks, Rob. Well, we've covered some serious topics today, so let's lighten the mood to wrap things up. What's your favorite kind of real cookie? We're talking real cookies now. And I'll go first. I'm a big fan of, at the Minnesota State Fair, they have Sweet Martha's cookies. I feel like this is a basic answer, but when you leave the fair, you can get a big bucket of cookies. They're so good. That'd have to be my favorite.
Gosh, those are so good. And they take a page right from White Castle too, not to go full circle, but more is better.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, they'll give you it's a giant bucket and it'll be overflowing. Like you walk up there and there's cookie carnage all around you because they dump it in this bucket. And then you got to eat it enough to close the bucket by the time you get to your car. You just have to.
Yeah. I'm going to throw out another Minnesota one since you brought up the Sweet Martha's, and it's the St. Olaf cookie. If you have ever, you can Google it. They make an excellent cookie. And I had never eaten one before. We were at a graduation party, and one of my daughter's friends is going to this college called St. Olaf here in Minnesota. And they are famous for this cookie recipe. It's excellent. It's oatmeal-y and chocolate. And
is it I was going to say, is it like a monster cookie or something?
It's kind of like it's a hearty cookie, but it's good stuff.
Interesting. Well, I feel like we're all kind of on the same path. I mean, there's lots of kinds of cookies. It's a crumble cookie that does, they've got, 5 or 6 flavors every week or whatever. And so there's a ton of options for us to choose from up here, more than we need. But I always come back to the chocolate chip cookie. I love crumble cookies, chocolate chip cookie. I also love Subway's chocolate chip cookie. Sweet Martha's is amazing.
Yes, that's true.
But I will say that it is a sin to not have a chewy chocolate chip cookie. When you go buy cookies, sometimes you'll buy them in a package and they're stiff and hard. And
yes. So here's where I'm going to go with you on that. The secret ingredient is not the chocolate chip. It's the butter.
Oh, absolutely.
It's
a hard chocolate chip cookie is a sin, I will say.
It is. Unless you've got a nice glass of milk, because then you can fix that problem. And then it actually is highly absorbent. The capillaries in the drier chocolate chip cookie, they maximize the suction of the fluid back into the cookie.
I guess that's the only way to try to save it. But
I'm with you, but I do want to just make a quick defense there. Those little Chips Ahoy cookies, they're almost like a cracker cookie. Those they're like a little teeny.
No,
you're all out on that?
Yeah, those are disgusting.
Oh.
I don't know. Because I was going with you there, like a big cookie. That's awful. But a little one, a little crunch, little Chips Ahoy. No? Okay.
No.
Well, it all comes full circle. I just went to crumblecookies.com and my first pop-up is the site uses cookies to improve your experience. I think that's a double meaning.
Wait, that's too funny.
Do I accept the cookies? Then it says accept all cookies. I do accept all the cookies. Crumble.
Please tell me they're using that to their advantage, right? Is it? Yeah.
No, they're not. There's a picture of a fake cookie, but then it's just general marketing jargon. Yeah, Crumble, you should update that.
Feels like an opportunity.
That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Ayana Klaphaki for producing the show and Taylor De Los Reyes for editing. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you find the show valuable, please leave us a rating and review. And if you'd like to hear more from us, subscribe to our weekly email newsletter. It's built for marketers seeking research-first analysis of the latest trends. You can go to marketingarchitects.com/newsletter to subscribe. Now go forth and build great marketing. Did you know that 90% of parrots are left-handed?
What?
They don't have hands. It's a trick question.
No, it's their feet, but they use their feet like hands. Have you seen a parrot?
Oh my gosh. I thought you said parents, not parrots.
Parrot.
I'm like, did you get that one from ChatGPT? I don't know if that's right.
Marketing Architects.